No matter how much history you've studied, chances are nothing feels as sudden, terrifying, and world-shifting as the Mongol invasions. Because the biggest question people still ask is, how did a group of nomadic tribes from the harsh steppes of Mongolia rise out of nowhere, sweep across Asia and Europe, defeat ancient civilizations, crush powerful kingdoms, and build the largest land empire in human history? How did horse archers, living in tents, conquer China, Persia, Russia, Baghdad, the Middle East, Central Asia, and reach the borders of Hungary and Vienna? And why, despite all the destruction and fear they spread, did their empire also ignite trade, innovation, cultural exchange, and a new connected world? Was it pure brutality or brilliant strategy? And if the Mongols had not invaded, would the modern world look completely different today? In this video, we're going to explore all of this: the origins of the Mongols, the rise of Genghis Khan, the wars that reshaped civilizations, the collapse of kingdoms that once seemed unstoppable, the long-term global impacts, and why this empire changed history more than almost any other. So without any delay, let's start. To understand how the Mongol invasions happened, we first have to forget today's borders, maps, and nation-states. Before the 1200s, the heart of Eurasia, the endless grasslands stretching from Manchuria to Eastern Europe, was ruled by nomadic tribes. These tribes were constantly fighting, forming alliances, breaking them, raiding each other, and surviving in one of the toughest environments on Earth. There was no central government, no written law, no cities, only clans, herds, horses, and warriors. Life was unpredictable, and power changed hands quickly. The Chinese dynasties, the Islamic empires, and even the kingdoms of Eastern Europe had always seen the steppe as a land of barbarians, dangerous but disorganized. They expected raids, not world conquest. But the Mongols had something unique: mobility, discipline, and the culture of warfare. Every man could ride a horse from childhood, shoot arrows accurately while galloping, survive extreme weather, navigate without maps, and live off minimal supplies. Yet despite this toughness, the Mongols were politically divided, until one man changed everything. Around 1162, a boy named Temujin was born into the Borjigin clan. His early life was not heroic. His father was poisoned when he was still a child. His family was abandoned by their tribe, left to starve on the steppe. Temujin was enslaved, escaped, lost allies, and spent years fighting just to survive. But instead of breaking him, this shaped him. He learned how fragile loyalty was, how power worked, and how leaders needed to be earned, not inherited. Slowly, Temujin built alliances, united clans, and attracted warriors not through tradition, but through reward, merit, and discipline. By 1206, after years of civil war, he united the Mongol tribes under a single banner, something no one had successfully done before. At a great council called a Kurultai, he was given a new title, Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler, and with that name, history changed direction. Genghis believed that a united Mongolia needed a mission beyond survival. The world outside the steppe was full of wealthy cities, kingdoms, and empires, many of which underestimated the Mongols. The first major target was northern China, ruled by the Yuan Dynasty. The Chinese saw themselves as the center of civilization. The Mongols, to them, were primitive nomads who should know their place. But Genghis Khan did not agree. The Mongols had fewer soldiers, less advanced technology, and no siege weapons. But they had speed, surprise, and something the Jin lacked: unity of purpose. Genghis transformed warfare. Mongol armies were organized into decimal units: tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, where discipline mattered more than clan loyalty. They mastered communication using horseback messengers and signal flags. They used psychological warfare, spreading fear before battles, offering surrender to avoid destruction, and punishing betrayal mercilessly. And they adapted quickly. When they needed siege engineers, they hired or captured Chinese, Persian, and Arab specialists. When they needed new weapons, they studied and copied them. Every campaign made them stronger. By 1215, the Mongols captured Zhengdu, present-day Beijing. The civilized world started to realize something shocking. These barbarian horsemen were not simply raiders. They were empire builders. But the event that truly launched the Mongol invasions across continents was not China. It was diplomacy gone wrong. Around 1219, Genghis sent peaceful traders and ambassadors to the Khwarazm Empire, which stretched across Persia, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. The Khwarazm ruler, Shah Alauddin Muhammad, panicked. He suspected espionage, so he executed the Mongol envoys. In steppe culture, killing ambassadors was an unforgivable insult, a declaration of total war. Genghis responded with the full force of the Mongol Empire. What followed was one of the most devastating campaigns in world history. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, and Nishapur, once centers of Islamic learning, trade, and culture, fell one after another. Mongol soldiers used diversion tactics, fake retreats, encirclements, and long-range archery to destroy larger armies. They used terror strategically. Stories of their brutality spread faster than their horses, causing cities to surrender without a fight. By 1221, the Khwarazm Empire no longer existed. This was not just a military victory, it was geopolitical transformation. The Silk Road, connecting China to the Middle East and Europe, now belonged to the Mongols. Suddenly, a trade network that had been divided by rival kingdoms was controlled by a single power. But Genghis Khan did not live to see his empire's full expansion. He died in 1227, leaving behind sons, generals, and a system of succession designed to maintain unity. And unlike many conquerors, his death did not stop the wars, it accelerated them. Under Kublai Khan, the Mongols completed the conquest of northern China and turned west toward Eastern Europe. Mongol armies under Subutai, one of history's greatest military strategists, swept through Russia, crossed the Caucasus, crushed Georgian and Armenian kingdoms, defeated Polish and German forces, and annihilated the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi in 1241. Europe braced for conquest. Chroniclers wrote that the apocalypse had arrived. Kings, popes, knights, all were terrified. But then, suddenly, the Mongols withdrew. The great Khan Ogedei had died, and the princes had to return home for a new Kurultai. Europe was saved not by military victory, but by timing. Meanwhile, another branch of the Mongol Empire focused on the Middle East, and their greatest achievement and greatest shock to the world would come a few decades later under Hulagu Khan. And this brings us to one of the most symbolic and devastating events in human history, the fall of Baghdad in 1258. For centuries, Baghdad had been the heart of the Islamic Golden Age, a center of science, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, literature, and medicine. The House of Wisdom alone preserved knowledge from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond. But the Abbasid Caliphate, once mighty, had grown politically weak and fragmented. When Hulagu demanded submission, the caliph refused, believing God and Islamic armies would protect the city. The Mongols laid siege. After only a few weeks, Baghdad fell, and what followed became legendary. Libraries burned, scholars were killed, and the Tigris River was said to have turned black from ink and red from blood. The fall of Baghdad was not just a military defeat, it was a civilizational earthquake. The Islamic world never fully recovered its former unity or intellectual dominance. By the mid-1200s, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. No empire in history had ever ruled more land. But success brought a new problem: size. Communication became difficult, rivalries emerged, and different branches of the Mongol royal family began operating independently. The empire slowly divided into four major khanates: the Yuan Dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia. And yet, even divided, they continued expanding. Even at its peak, the Mongol Empire was never satisfied. Expansion was not just strategy, it was ideology. Genghis Khan had left behind a belief that the Mongols were destined to rule the world, and his descendants inherited that mission. So the empire kept looking outward, toward new frontiers that had never seen steppe warriors before. One of the most dramatic attempts came under Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson and the man who completed the conquest of China. After decades of siege warfare, political maneuvering, and brilliant strategy, he defeated the southern Song dynasty, creating the Yuan Dynasty, the first time China was fully ruled by foreign conquerors. With its huge population, agricultural wealth, advanced bureaucracy, and refined culture, China became the heart of the Mongol Empire. But ruling China required something the steppe world had never practiced: administration, taxation, agriculture management, infrastructure, diplomacy, and urban governance. Kublai transformed from a nomadic warlord into a Chinese emperor, and in doing so, changed what it meant to be Mongol. But Kublai wanted more. Across the sea lay Japan, wealthy, untouched, and proud. When the Japanese refused to submit, the Mongols attempted two massive invasions in 1274 and 1281. Their armies actually landed on Japanese shores, shocking the samurai with explosives, coordinated infantry charges, and cavalry tactics Japan had never seen. But nature intervened. Both times, typhoons destroyed Mongol fleets. The Japanese called these storms kamikaze divine winds. And while Japanese warriors honored their bravery, the real reason for victory was weather. The Mongol Empire had met a force it could not predict or defeat: the Pacific Ocean. The Mongols also turned south toward Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Burma, Kampa, expecting easy victories. But tropical jungles, disease, unpredictable terrain, monsoons, and guerrilla warfare broke their momentum. The Mongol military machine, designed for open plains and mobility, struggled in humid forests. It was a reminder that even the world's strongest empire had limits. But the most important push, the one that determined the future of the Middle East, came toward Egypt. After Baghdad fell, nothing seemed capable of stopping the Mongols. Islamic cities collapsed one after another. But in 1260, near the small town of Ain Jalut, in Palestine, something unexpected happened. The Mamluks, slave warriors of Egypt, many originally from the same steppes as the Mongols, stood their ground. Led by Sultan Qutuz and General Baybars, they lured the Mongols into an ambush, surrounded them, and defeated them. For the first time, the Mongol expansion machine was stopped by force, not timing or weather. Ain Jalut mattered not just because of the battle, but because of the world it protected. If the Mongols had conquered Egypt, they may have taken North Africa, passed through the Mediterranean, and reached Europe again. Instead, the Middle East gained a new defender, and the Mongol Empire learned that its power was not unlimited. So if the Mongol Empire was so successful militarily, what caused it to decline? The answer is complex and surprisingly modern. First, empires built through personality often collapse when that personality disappears. Genghis Khan had united the Mongols through charisma, legitimacy, and fear, but after his death, rivalry returned. Every time a great Khan died, the royal family struggled over succession. Brothers fought cousins, generals backed different princes, alliances shifted, and political unity weakened. Instead of conquering the world, the Mongols began fighting each other. Second, the empire became too large to rule effectively. Messages took months to travel across it. Different regions developed different economies, cultures, laws, and priorities. The Golden Horde in Russia cared about trade with Europe. The Ilkhanate in Persia faced rebellions and religious struggles. The Yuan Dynasty in China was focused on internal stability and administrative reform. The Chagatai Khanate struggled with leadership disputes. Eventually, these khanates became independent states rather than one empire. Third, the Mongols transformed from nomads into rulers, and ruling requires compromise. They adopted agriculture, taxation, bureaucracy, and city life. Their armies no longer lived entirely on horseback. They lost some of the mobility, toughness, and adaptability that once defined them. And finally, economic transformation brought unexpected consequences. The Mongols reopened the Silk Road, connected China to Europe, protected merchants, standardized weights and measures, and created a passport system called the Pesa, allowing travelers to move safely across continents. This era, known as the Pax Mongolica, created the greatest period of transcontinental trade the world had ever seen. Ideas, religion, technology, and culture flowed freely. Chinese gunpowder, paper, printing, and navigational tools reached Europe. Persian astronomy reached China. Islamic medicine influenced Mongol courts. European explorers, including Marco Polo, traveled to Asia and brought back stories that would later inspire the age of exploration. But increased connectivity also spread something else: disease. The Black Death, which killed tens of millions in Europe during the mid-1300s, likely traveled along Mongol trade routes from Central Asia. Some historians believe a Mongol siege in Crimea helped launch the pandemic into Europe. Ironically, the same system that united the world also devastated it. By the late 1300s, the Mongol Empire no longer existed as a single political unit. China rebelled and formed the Ming Dynasty. The Ilkhanate collapsed. The Golden Horde fractured into smaller khanates, many of which were later conquered by Muscovy, helping create modern Russia. Central Asia became a battlefield for rising powers like Timur. The Mongol Empire faded, but its influence did not. Because here's the surprising part: the Mongols may have conquered through war, but their long-term legacy was not only destruction. The map of Eurasia today still reflects their impact. Russia developed as a centralized, militarized state partly in response to Mongol rule. China's borders, bureaucracy, postal networks, and imperial structure expanded under the Yuan Dynasty. The Silk Road became the foundation of global trade. Islamic civilization shifted west toward Egypt after Baghdad's fall. Europe, terrified by Mongol strength, later invested in firearms, fortification, exploration, and diplomacy. The world began thinking in terms of interconnected continents, not isolated kingdoms. Even modern globalization, the idea that distant societies are economically and culturally linked, has roots in Mongol policy. The empire forced the world to interact, and humanity never separated again. Yet the Mongols are remembered in dramatically different ways depending on where you stand. In China, they are foreign conquerors but also dynastic rulers. In Russia, they are a shaping force, both feared and foundational. In Iran and the Middle East, they represent cultural trauma and historical tragedy. In Mongolia, they are national heroes, founders of a proud legacy. In Europe, they are the unstoppable enemy that almost arrived at the gates. And in global history, they remain a paradox, destroyers and unifiers at the same time. So what if the Mongol invasions never happened? Would Baghdad still be the intellectual capital of the world? Would China have explored the oceans earlier? Would Europe have remained fragmented, unaware of Asia? Would Russia have developed differently? Perhaps more like Western Europe? Would globalization have taken centuries longer? History doesn't give answers, only possibilities. But what we know for certain is this: no empire before or since reshaped such a vast part of the world so quickly. And perhaps the most astonishing thing is that it all began with scattered tribes in the windswept grasslands of Mongolia. People who slept under the open sky, drank fermented mare's milk, learned to ride before they walked, and believed the world should never stand still. They didn't build their empire with stone, cities, or monuments. They built it with movement. And in their movement, they changed the course of human civilization. So the next time you look at a world map, remember that many of its borders, languages, trade routes, political systems, and cultural interactions were shaped, directly or indirectly, by Mongol horses galloping across the steppe 8 centuries ago. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Mongol Empire was more destructive or more transformative for world history? Comment your thoughts below.